And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. A median is a portion of roadway separating opposite directions of roadway or local lanes from through travel lanes. Medians may be depressed, raised, or flush with the road surface. On today's Open Connection, we'll open our archives to bring you this story from 2000.
It began as a provincial government Smithers-Town improvement project late last year, and it escalated into much more. Petitions, consultations, and council meetings were attended by hundreds, all for a highway beautification and safety project that is expected to begin early next spring. When the plans for the project were first tabled and shown to the public, there wasn't much fanfare. In fact, the town organized a counter-petition so residents could halt the project until a referendum could take place. 5% of eligible voters in Smithers needed to sign the petition. Only about 1% actually signed. Some say the reason for this was because many had not yet seen the plans, didn't understand them, or thought they were fine as they were. But others say the referendum didn't take place because the process of going to the town office and presenting identification was too intimidating. Soon after, several people began actively campaigning against the project. But what was it about the plans that had them so upset? Concerned because they say the median will either cut off access to many businesses along the highway or make it very difficult for tourists and locals alike to access those areas. So business and property owners Ken Hoskins, Bob Hampton, and former Smithers Mayor Carmen Graff set up a stand outside of the post office in July, encouraging passers-by to sign a petition asking the town to reconsider the whole project until the town extensively consulted residents and business owners and told them exactly what the plans included.
We have right around 100 signatures already.
In 2 hours?
Yeah.
That's good.
And people are getting educated about the plan. Most people that have stopped by really haven't seen this plan or haven't seen it before.
We have a very big cross-sectional component of people that are quite interested, both from recreation, from business, from tourist orientation, and from access and egress and the future of the town of Smithers. They feel that we're in transition, that tourism is the way that we're going to be looking at the future, and this plan with the divided median is not going to enhance our development, and it's not going to promote tourism because it's going to chase business away.
After the post office, the men continued gathering signatures. At last count, they say they had 400 citizens and 150 members of the business community sign. But Mayor Brian Northup says not only had the public already been consulted, but several public meetings were also held to inform the public about the project. The mayor says the intersection improvements and the median are necessary for safety's sake. And local police, the Transportation Ministry, and the ICBC office agree. They say safety and accidents must be reduced along the main areas of the town highway corridor. And the highway improvement project with the median is the way to do it.
The design on this highway, the number one focus is to improve safety. This particular corridor has a significant number of accidents, far higher than the provincial average, and the entire design concept is to produce a safer transportation corridor for the residents of Smithers and for travelers along the Trans-Canada Highway. It's not a specific thing, it's a whole number of things that go through and address safety issues all the way through the design and through the corridor.
We feel that in most cases, not all, that we've been able to successfully change some accesses to provide safe turning radiuses and safe accesses. Some businesses are not going to have the same accesses that they have presently. The present accesses are actually illegal in most cases, and in cases where they're not illegal, usually they're very unsafe, and the statistics have shown us that.
In fact, the local ICBC office and RCMP say that close to 300 accidents, from minor fender benders to fatalities, have occurred along the highway in Smithers from May 1996 to May of 2000. Or about 70 crashes per year. They also say the number of accidents, mid-block versus intersections, is about equal, and the most accidents occurred along the busiest sections of town, near King, Queen, and Main Streets. ICBC says with the new highway improvements, they expect the number of accidents to be reduced by at least 65%. But don't tell that to the businessmen and residents who aren't convinced of those figures.
What are the stats for Houston, Burns Lake, Vanderloo, Prince George, McBride? You're throwing a lot of figures around here. We tried to get those figures from Mr. Benson a couple weeks ago. He didn't have them. Now all of a sudden you have them. What are the stats for the other communities of a like size? I don't believe the figures you're giving us are true.
A final public meeting was held about 2 months ago as an effort to explain the project and its ramifications to all involved. The mayor, highways department, ICBC and architects attended. So did their opponents. It resulted in yet another stalemate.
They've got their own little agenda, and that's exactly what they plan on doing. They don't care how many petitioners there are against it. They don't care how many former mayors, how many business people are against this plan. They've got one thing in their mind. We're going to cram this down their throats, like it or not.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. In search of financial freedom, people came together and changed the way we bank. They pooled their savings and offered loans at reasonable rates to people in their communities. Credit unions were started by people who wanted to help other people achieve a better standard of living. Let us return to the archives to bring you this story from 2000.
Credit unions have been, in my opinion, the most wildly successful social experiment in the history of this country. Certainly in 3 provinces, Quebec, Saskatchewan, and British Columbia, they are really very notable in the financial services industry.
It's been 60 years now that Northern Savings Credit Union has been operating in northwestern BC. Originally, it was 2 separate entities, the Prince Rupert Fishermen's Credit Union and Kane Consumers Credit Union. The credit union movement was much different from the banks in its earlier days, with business often being done on a nod and a handshake.
Harry Lloyd and Johnny Carpenter are long-time members, and I went to buy another boat earlier, and Johnny Carpenter and a couple of the board of directors had looked at her, and they came to me and said, "Clyde, stay away from that boat. We don't think that's very good." And I took their advice. Shortly after that, Harry Lloyd came to me and said, "By the way, the old Zipporah is going to be for sale. She's been seized and she's down in Vancouver. Why don't you go take a look at her?" So I did, and I took a look at her, and they had sent somebody down, I think, to look at her, and they said, "Well, if you're interested in her, we'd recommend that the loan be approved for you to buy her."
I remember one friend of mine, his washing machine broke down, and it was not repairable anymore, so he needed a new washing machine. He went to the stores, and he could have this washing machine or that one, but he didn't have the money. Oh, where do you bank? Well, he didn't bank at all because he paid everything cash. No credit reference. Nobody would sell him a washing machine. But the credit union took a chance on him and lent him the money he needed, and he paid it off, and that's why we call it the People's Bank. They helped out there.
I used to see Dad get letters back from the bank with such high interest and then compound interest. But when the credit unions came in, everything, he was getting up with the rest of the farmers, because they'd buy cheap, and if he didn't have the money, you paid it whenever you got the money. And I knew it would work here, and it worked for houses, it worked for cars, boats.
And early credit unions certainly really did an awful lot of their lending based upon their knowledge of their neighbors and their character. To a certain extent, we've unfortunately outgrown some of that. This community is much bigger than it used to be. There's more transient people that simply you don't know as well as you used to know people in a community. And so to some extent, I think that early advantage of credit unions has been lost. We still try to operate that way, and wherever we can, we do.
The family or community atmosphere of the credit union was epitomized by staff like longtime general manager George Varick, who was responsible for both the Fishermen's Credit Union and Kane Consumers during his tenure.
Most longtime credit union members have what we call Uncle George stories. George Varick being the founder of the organization, he wasn't shy about giving us a little talking to if we thought we weren't being as thrifty as we should be, and being a young man in the heady days of the halibut fishery and earning big dollars and maybe not being quite as prudent as I should have been. I got my share of sit-down talks with Uncle George too. So
I went to where I thought I could get a loan, and they sort of threw me out. Went down and talked to Uncle George at the credit union. He said, "Why didn't you come to me first?" He says, "Go give him a check." And we bought a house. And that was 38 years ago. And that was George Varick, and he's been a founding. I think there's a lot of people in this town that still knows him as Uncle George, and yet they're not related.
Although a lot of changes have occurred in the last 20 years, one being the merger of the two credit unions in 1987, Northern Savings says its impact has not lessened because it's tried to maintain the same philosophy that made it popular amongst the working families of the community so many years ago.
I think originally it was a fact of people helping people. I mean, people were depositing money, that money was staying in their community and allowing people in the community to take out loans to better their position.
And I was shopping around for a loan to buy my equipment to get me started in my own business, and the other ones I'd gone in with my portfolio. I figured maybe I could get them to, just at least look at what I did, and maybe, because we had other financial obligations at the time, so there wasn't the extra cash to help us get it going. So I went in to see, at that time I think her name was Sherry, and the one thing she asked me the other banks didn't do me is, what is it you do? And she was in, so I pulled up my portfolio, and she had a look at it, and she said, "Oh, I've seen that. And we had a bit of a chat, and so the next day, I had the money, and without hesitation. And the business has been growing steadily ever since.
I think that the staff at the credit union are quite stable, and they get to know members, and so there's an ongoing relationship. You're not just a number or a bank account for most of those people. I think that's a very important part of it. And I think they know the economics of the community, so they're more able to respond individually to members' needs in terms of loans or business needs.
One of the ways Northern Savings has tried to stay prominent in the communities it does business in is through the support it gives to local initiatives and charities.
They help out everything from the baton twirlers to hockey tournaments to seniors involvement, right across the whole board. The credit union's involved with promoting the community.
We are nothing more or nothing less than the communities we work in. We represent in a very real and I guess democratic way the strengths and the weaknesses that every community has. We certainly make a point, and my board of directors is pretty tough on me in this area. We make a point of supporting local initiatives.
The future is unclear for the credit union movement as the larger banks have increasingly become one-stop shopping networks for everything from car and life insurance to mutual funds and market investment. In response to these changes, Northern Savings has tried to keep up by attempting to provide the same services.
We have the phone home banking now. We have financial services to allow members to plan ahead into the future for their retirement.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. Situated near the longitudinal center of Canada and at the heart of the continent, the Canadian Museum for Human Rights began as an idea by Canadian tax lawyer and media magnate Israel Asper. It's just one of the many museums you can visit virtually. Let us return to the archives to bring you this story from 2000.
A little bit of something for everyone of all ages.
And people of all ages were impressed, most of all the kids, entertained and intrigued at stops in Prince Rupert, Terrace, and Smithers.
I think it's pretty cool.
pretty cool and pretty creative as well. Imagine trying to squeeze more than 1,000 years of provincial history into 3 tractor-trailer units. Well, that's just what the BC 2000 tour did.
It's amazing. We have 3 tractor-trailer units. We've combined about 1,000 years of history within these tractor-trailer units. Amazing display.
One of our biggest goals is to bring around the history and where BC is and where it is, and an educational experience for everyone. As you can see, we've done lots of school groups, and it's a great experience for them and a different way for them to learn.
And learn they did. From forestry to mining and tourism to technology, little kids and big kids couldn't get enough.
That's pretty cool because, like, you can touch buttons and stuff, and you can, like, the Jeopardy thing.
Okay. What was your favorite part?
I like the dinosaur bone, the mining place.
This is basically like a representation of all the mines and everything that are in BC. So it's kind of, we have different samples of rocks, and the film that's on here is of like different mines all over, how they blast and things like that. But there's also like a gold mine, how they pour the gold and everything to get the blocks of gold. So you kind of walk into something that's overwhelming.
For 6 months, the Millennium Tour rolled through the province, overwhelming people in the 41 BC communities where it stopped. The mini museum on wheels, a 2,600 square meter pavilion, brought the province to the province. Funded by the government, the tour was part of BC's Millennium celebrations.
What we're trying to do is bring British Columbia to 41 communities around the province. And not just British Columbia as we know it today, but British Columbia as it's been from the beginning of time. In fact, one of the very first exhibits is you walk into a dinosaur dig. And from there you go right through history, and you end up with Tony Parsons telling you news stories of what's happened throughout British Columbia in the past 100 years. What are you listening to?
I'm listening to A Century of BC Voice, and it's 1960 to 1969.
The Haida people come from.
They quite like the game show. The game show gets them all involved, and they have the time to scream and shout and get a little wild. And they also like going through the trailers because it's all hands-on. They can touch and feel things.
If the exhibit was fun and exciting for the kids, imagine what the whole 6-month tour must have been like for those on board.
We get to see beautiful BC, which is just fantastic. And we're also you learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about different jobs on this kind of a tour. Like in a regular day-to-day 9-to-5 job, you wouldn't have the same experiences that we do here. We get to talk to people from all over BC, and they have little stories about BC as well. So we're learning a lot about our past.
But it was the kids who got the most out of the exhibit.
So what did you guys see in there?
We saw a submarine. Yeah.
Submarine?
We saw a coal mine place, and we saw Rick Henry.
A history lesson in time for a new millennium and a new chapter in BC history. For these children, looking back may well be the best way to forge ahead.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Invented in 1976 by a Los Angeles Dodgers trainer, the throat guard is a piece of protective equipment worn in various sports, including baseball, ice hockey, and lacrosse. In this final segment of Open Connection, we return to the archives with Bob Park with All Seasons Sorts for Sports.
As of January 1st, if minor hockey players don't wear a specially certified throat protector, they won't be allowed on the ice. A ruling from the Canadian Amateur Hockey Association, passed at their spring annual meeting, states all players must wear a throat protector, which has been stamped by the BNQ Standards Act. The new hockey law originally came into play in September, causing havoc for parents, players, and suppliers. The supply simply couldn't meet the demand, something store owners now say is under control.
They've definitely leveled off now, but I still think there's a lot of kids out there that have said, oh, we don't have to wait till January 1st now. And I still feel we're going to have a rush in the next month.
So do you have enough supply to meet the demand right now?
Who knows? We don't know what the demand's going to be, but I think we're in good shape.
The CAHA had been looking for a standard for throat protectors for a while, but instead of waiting for the Canadian Standards Association to come up with one, they jumped on the BNQ.
I think what really happened with the whole neck protector scene was Canadian Standards Association did not have a CSA standard for neck guard manufacturing. And the only people that had it was the BNQ, which is the Quebec Approval Association, I believe associated with minor hockey in Quebec. So what happened was they had an approval, so Canadian Amateur Hockey, rather than waiting for the CSA to come out with something, jumped on the bandwagon and said, well, we'll go with BNQ standards. Now, unfortunately, and I really don't agree with it, I would say that 95% of the neck guards that are out this year are exactly the same as last year's, except they have a BNQ stamp on the neck somewhere, and it's just this little hammer look with the circle, and that is the B&Q stamp, basically.
Brian Downey is with Terrace Minor Hockey and thinks the new guards are necessary.
The throat protector is part of a program by Canadian Amateur to change some of our rules to make hockey more safe, to reduce the risk of injury. So the throat protector is part of it. Some of our new penalties are checking from behind penalties or stick penalties. They're intended to reduce the risk of injury. And so as part of that package, it's kind of all in the name of good risk management that these are put into place. So hopefully we'll make hockey a better, a safer game.
Now a parent comes in, tells you, I just bought a throat protector last year. It's the same thing as the new one. It just doesn't have the BNQ stamp on it. Can't little Bobby wear this? Has that been a problem?
I've heard that, and I understand, but the ruling is that unfortunately all players will have to have them, and they have to have the BNQ certification. So unfortunately, there's no option.
Originally, thoughts were only one kind of throat protector would be available. That hasn't been the case.
This ring style is approved, and it just basically goes on like that, sits around the neck in that manner, and it is BNQ approved as well, being a cut-proof material. So it doesn't have to be a bib, but it has to have the BNQ stamp, and there's not a neck guard that was manufactured previous to this year that has the B&Q stamp.
Why are there new guards this year? What's the big difference between the guards this year compared to last year's guards?
A lot of the guards are not different. It's just that this year they've had to have a B&Q approval on them. In the past, CSA standards have never had a standard or a number that they have applied to an approved neck guard. There's never been an approved neck guard. And the Canadian Amateur Hockey decided for minor hockey leagues that they wanted to go with some kind of approved neck guard, and the scenes that there wasn't one from CSA standards, they went with the B&Q approved, which is interesting because it originates in Quebec. So of course the first ones to have B&Q approved were all Quebec companies, but that's kind of how it comes, and then it evolved into across Canada. Bang, you've got to have them.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind to his heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.